Renders usually come out from here looking a bit flat, and they have a pretty low contrast if you're using some sort of a Reinhardt or exponential color mapping. And this is actually a good thing, since all the color information is there. You just need to give it a bit of a punch, make it a bit more lively, so to speak, in Photoshop. It's quite easy to do, and Photoshop gives you multiple tools to achieve this effect. So let's start with the most basic one, brightness and contrast. I'm going to do this in adjustment layers so they are non-destructive. So brightness and contrast allows you to make the image more contrasty, less contrasty, and brighter or darker. And you usually combine these, since increasing the contrast sort of darkens the image, so you might want to boost the brightness as well. And the same goes in the opposite direction. If you reduce the contrast, the image becomes a bit lighter, so you bring the brightness down. And these are some very basic adjustments, and there's not really much to them. Just tweak those sliders a little bit, and if you're happy, that's good. Now, well, let's look at another method that gives you a lot more control over the contrast, and this method is called curves. Basically, you see the histogram of the image here, which is showing you how many pixels of the whole image are at this brightness range. For example, completely white pixels are right here, completely black pixels are right here, everything in the middle is distributed right here. So as you can see, we mostly have darker pixels, so maybe you might want to brighten the image a little bit. You can drag the midpoint up or down to brighten or darken the image. So I'm brightening it, and then you can adjust your black point by moving it right just to the first pixel, so you have a full color range from black to white, and move it to the left for the white pixels, so we have full color range, full gradient. And then let's add some contrast by bringing these dark pixels down a little bit to make them a bit darker, and lightening these white pixels a little bit. Not white, but the pixels between medium gray and white. So the result is usually something like the letter S. You boost the highlights and you darken the shadows, and you get a nice contrast for your image. So as you can see, the curves tool is pretty useful, and it can be very specific. So you want to boost this only, and it can look very weird and very non-realistic very quickly. So try to keep the curves flowing very smoothly and not make any radical adjustments. Usually it's best to be quite subtle. Just enough punch for the image to look good. Right, so the next method to add contrast is copying everything by using copy merged, pasting it, okay. And changing the mode for blending to overlay or soft light or hard light, whichever one you want. It makes the image quite a bit more contrasty. And you can reduce the opacity a bit if the effect is too strong. And this sort of adjustment makes a slightly different look than just adjusting the contrast. It's kind of hard to explain what exactly happens here, but try it out and see, and for some images this makes sense sometimes. The result looks good. Adjust the opacity. I almost never use the opacity at 100% for this method. And try it out, see what works, what doesn't. And it's just one of the tools you can use. Okay, so one more thing you can use for adjusting contrast, and it's called exposure. And this one is mostly used for 32-bit images. there's really not many benefits for using it on 16 bits. And basically it sort of works similar to the brightness and contrast adjustment, except the brightness is called exposure and the contrast is called gamma correction. Okay. So as you increase the gamma correction up, it gives more contrast to the image, and the exposure makes it brighter. And it works best with 32-bit images. This one is 16-bit image, so there's really no real point in using this adjustment. Right, so that was global contrast for the whole image at the same time. Now let's look at some methods you can use to add local contrast. And local contrast is something that happens when you zoom in between smaller areas. It gives more contrast to, for example, between the shadow and this little bush here, or this border and water and things like that, instead of changing the whole image at the same time. And basically the way I use it is I create a copy of my whole image by using copy, merge and paste, and I use the high pass filter. Okay, first I set the blending mode to hard light and then use high pass. And I usually use a larger radius, and you can see exactly how much it affects the image in this little preview image right here. Okay, so you can adjust the scale. For example, something like this. Obviously the effect is very strong at the moment, so you want to bring that down. But still you can see the local contrast being added. So you can also use a couple of layers with different radiuses and combine them and change the opacity to get a perfect mix of them, or the two or three, or however many you want to use. Okay. So we gave the image a little bit of more separation between the details. Alright, and the destructive way to get the same effect would be using the unsharp mask filter, where you set the radius as you did for the high pass, and you set the opacity with this amount slider. And this is if you don't care about any further adjustments and you just want to make some local contrast a bit stronger and be done with it. So you make the adjustment, press OK, and here's how it changes. Right? And this is the destructive way. Using high pass filter is better, since you can undo or change the strength later easily. So I guess that's pretty much it for the contrast. Experiment a bit and see what works for you.